Yes, Mr. Baker.
I move the Cherokee Junior to this.
We have the invocation first. And may I ask you to do that invocation? Did you get to raise your hand?
That's it. Our gracious Heavenly Father, let's thank you for this day that we can come together and do your work and give you the glory for each and everything we do that benefits our people. And bless our troops overseas and keep them out of harm's way. And give each and every one here traveling grace as they leave this meeting and the meetings later tonight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
And at this time, I'll entertain your motion to add Mr. Hoskins.
I make a motion to add Chuck Hoskins Jr. to this committee.
Second.
There's a second from Mr. Anglin. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. You are unanimously added. Thank you, Mr. Hoskins, for being here. We appreciate you. And Madam Secretary, would you please have roll call?
Yes. Kara Callan Watt.
Honey?
Bill Anglin.
Here.
Bill John Baker.
Here.
Arlie Buzzard.
Here.
Joe Crittenden.
Here.
Jody Fishenhawk. Janelle Fulbright. Don Garvin. Tyler Gloria Jordan. David Thornton. Chuck Hoskins Jr.
Here.
Leo Clark.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Now, I believe we have Mr. Hembry continuing on, and I was trying to find my notes, what section we're on. Is it 3?
Actually supposed to start with 5.
Yes.
5. Okay.
But we have minutes.
Section 5 is where my indication is the last we went off. And we were dealing with, and I don't see...
Before we get started, let me just make sure. So this is similar to the election law format. This is the clean amendments. So these are the ones we've already proposed in 1 and 4, and then we're starting on 5. And your suggested amendments, so it may be easier to follow.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
So title in Section 1 and Section 4 have already been passed by this subcommittee.
Correct.
Okay.
Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay, Section 5 goes through the duties right now of the TERO office. Now, the main proposed amendment in this section is whether to amend it to create a TERO Employment Rights Commission. The idea from counselors is that there be an independent commission similar to the setup of the election commission, in which one member of the commission would be appointed by the principal chief, carte blanche. One would be appointed by the council, carte blanche. Those two would pick a third, which would be approved by both the principal chief and the tribal council. With our dealings with the election commission, we know how this works. In the amendment that I put forward, it is to be, serve a 4-year term. They could be removed from office by any other appointed or elected official with the Cherokee Nation. And I guess what I would recommend at this point is for the subcommittee to discuss the pros and cons of having a commission so we can make that decision and go forward from there.
Yes, Mr. Baker.
Under this one, if they have the authority to hire staff, does that mean they've got the authority to fire prison staff?
Would they have the authority to fire staff? Yeah, I guess we would want to put in there that they could hire and fire their staff in accordance with the human resources policy of the Cherokee Nation. Would be my suggestion. We could change it to make employment decisions in accordance with the human resources policy of the Cherokee Nation.
Are you done, Mr. Baker?
I'm done.
Any other committee members have any questions? If not, I have some questions. So is this similar to like the election commission or naming commission, the way it's worded exactly right now in our laws?
It is worded very closely to how the election commission is set up. I took the duties of the TERO office that is in the present piece of legislation, our present law, and also incorporated how we chose the election commission and then amended the duties respectfully from there.
Yes, Mr. Baker.
Another question. Right now, this is under Diane Kelly. If we make this a commission, I assume that's going to take her and her staff and everything completely out of the loop. Is that what this is envisioning?
I don't know about taking out the loop. I mean, what I would envision it is that Diane Kelly and her staff would answer to the TERO commission.
Well, and my concern here is we've got TERO as it's set up right now. If we put it under, then, you know, Diane's wearing 2 or 3 hats right now anyway. She doesn't, this isn't her full-time deal. She works the job for her. She kind of does, several things. And I'm concerned that we will make it extremely disruptive if we throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, okay, now it's going to be a commission. Now you decide whether Diane's going to work for the commission or going to work for the chief. And that goes with a bunch of the other staff, because there's very few of them that this is all they do. Am I right with that?
So I'm really not sure how to proceed forward. I think on face value that the commission in itself is a good idea, because I think there's been ongoing concern about whether or not.
I agree with that, but I'm just
But
playing devil's advocate here.
logistically, we're talking about a budget increase because of staffing needs, and even whatever we put on paper here, my guess is that whoever the commission is will come back within 6 months to a year and say it's got to be different. It's got to be changed, there'll have to be additional staff potentially, because what we're doing here, if we take and the executive and finance and the full council votes in exactly what we've got already, we're talking about a significant increase in staff requirements in order to meet this act. And when it's all said and done, this is going to be somewhat of a painful process for some, because it might be slow and deliberate, but we're going to have to go back and look at the act again once we're done, because we're going to have to make some choices from my perspective.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. President.
Can I ask John Overacker a question here?
Yeah,
John,
please come forward, Mr. Overacker.
how many people are actively in the TERO enforcement, TERO type program?
Basically, we have 5 right now, 5 full-time staff. That'll be Don Greenfeather, Leroy Wolf, Dale Gibson, Christine Rogers, which I don't know if you guys have met yet. And then there's myself, and I have an admin assistant, Tracy, and Rob Doherty, who's one of our job coordinators. We also have access right now for our OJTs and our classroom training of Nettie Deatherage and Daryl Legg, who are underneath the Ross program. They also help us on the OJTs and the classroom training. They do the applications, do the contracts for the OJTs, and do the monitoring for that right now.
And right now, your funding comes from where?
The funding we have now, we currently receive from the tribal funds, and that pays for our staffing, and I believe Daryl and Nettie are paid out of the Ross program. And part of our funding comes from the Nahasda. I believe Chris is paid out of Nahasda, so is Rob Doherty. And then that may be, I may be misspeaking, that's more for Diane, but I think that's how it is.
Mr. President, are you complete? Mr. Baker.
And then above you, is Diane, or is there Larry Ketcher and Diane, and
No, I report directly to Diane.
just so the only one above you is Diane.
Correct.
Okay.
I would suggest, because I think the committee needs more time to ponder this actual section. So my suggestion to the committee is maybe table this part until the end, and we'll come back to it.
Move that one.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. We'll table it till the end and come back to it.
Okay. One thing that might be helpful in that in your analysis is finding out what type of budget impact a commission would have and staffing concerns. And myself or any of the counselors may talk to Ms. Kelly about that, and about how the infrastructure will actually work.
Mr. Henry, we're going to ask you to actually go do that and research that, bring that back for us.
Will do.
Thank you. And I assume Doug and probably Evans can probably address it in comparison with like the election commission budget and then also the early gaming commission budget. Because I'm assuming we won't get as big as that gaming commission.
I'll make a note here. Hey, how about those Cowboys? Okay. Going on with Section 5, we have the duties that the TERO office, or if it goes to a commission, or the commission would have. The change here is in Section 5E to establish numerical hiring goals and timetables specifying the minimum number of Indians as employers must hire. Yes.
Is this, my 5E that we were going down is now staff, and it's the hire and fire deal. So, and I was wondering, if you go back to the first page, because you're on the second, was what I thought we were on.
What I'll show you where I'm coming from is in the book, proposed TERO amendment section.
Okay, because I thought, so this 5A through E is not, you've got 5A through E, and then you have 5E, L, and W.
Where are you?
First page, right here.
And I know that's where you are, but it doesn't make sense with now with what we've got numbered and what's going on.
That was on the next page.
I was too.
Okay.
So what did we table?
We tabled 5A through E on the second page.
Okay.
All those items doing with commission.
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay. Well, if you go to the Section 5 of the Act itself, you have E would be the next one in order if we're not going to have the commission. Okay.
So we're,
To establish.
but when you bring this back, when we're tabled, this will need to be cleared up on what that actual numbering should be then.
Yeah, and that's part of the the trouble of going through a working group is if you don't pass something,
Understood?
Yeah.
We're making sure we're all on the same page. So we're going
Right.
back to page 1, and this have to do with the actual Act, Section 5E.
Sure would be nice if these were numbered.
Yeah, please add page numbers next time
We'll
too.
talk about that right there.
No.
Page numbers as well to the pages.
Page numbers.
We appreciate it, Mr. Henry.
Okay.
I think they're giggling more at themselves than yours.
Well, I can't make it in order.
Not you.
I'm doing the best I can, people. All right. Section
We'll blame it all
5.
on Mr. Baker.
Everything else is.
Well, what I would wish to discuss with the consent of the committee is Section 5 of the Act, subsection E, which begins to establish numerical hiring goals. Okay? Establish numerical hiring goals in timetables specifying the minimum number of Indians as employer. As an employer must have, by craft or skill level, of the following: a minimum of 45% Indian employment by the year 2010, and that's a year change because we've been dealing with this for a little bit. Then an annual 10% increase thereafter until accomplishing a 75% goal. Obviously, the intent of the is to legislate a high percentage of Indian employment with TERO vendors.
Who wants to start? Mr. England.
Well, I like this idea. I like the way this wording's been changed. I would support something like this. 'Cause I think this is the only way we're ever gonna get our Indian employment up to the bar where we need it, you know.
Did anyone else have any comment? Because I had a comment. Mr. Baker?
Well, there again, I'm going to play devil's advocate, and nobody wants to hire 100% Cherokees more than I do. But folks, if we continue to grow in our casinos, especially at Catoosa and on the fringe at Westside Lone and those places, I mean, I can speak for Cherokee County right now. We have an unemployment rate of 4.2%. And if we were to build a big casino and expect to fully staff it with Cherokees, with all the Cherokees that we've got right here in Cherokee County, we would be hard pressed. I mean, if we added 1,000 Cherokees, we would be hard pressed. And when you get further away from the heart and you get to the fringes, there might be a whole lot of folks that are looking for work in Delaware County, but how many are really qualified for all the jobs that we do? And I just to have a cut and dried without and CNI, if they go into aerospace and buy companies outside the 14 counties, they're really going to be struggling at that point. And I hate to give wiggle room, but we need to be a little smart about this deal. And if there's another way to word it to encourage it, I mean, we're not perfect, but CNE is running at what percentage?
60%, I believe.
At 60% now. They have been as much as 75%, but
Overall Indian employment.
do what?
Overall Indian employment.
Yeah, overall Indian employment. That's right. And they're having job fairs for just Cherokees and just Native Americans, and they're signing up all they can get, and it's half enough. Well, that's taking the number down if they're at 60 and they can hire half of what they need, out of the Indian pool. I don't want to hamstring them, but at the same time, I want to do the very best that we possibly can, and I just am trying to think about a happy medium where we can press them to do the absolute best they can, but we're not going to be 100%, folks. It's not going to get there. But anyway, I'll be quiet.
First Mr. Buzzard and then Mr. Hoskins.
I see these are goals and not set in stone. The other thing is, I guess I've got a question about this. CNE is already at 60%. CNI is probably, I don't know, not counting the other companies they have out, but they got a high percentage there in Stillwell. But then we're saying a minimum of 45% in employment by 2010. I'm not sure. Is this only addressing contractors, or is it addressing Cherokee Nation as a whole, Todd?
The idea is to address, well, depending on how the final act comes. I mean, if you pass the final act defining employer as the Cherokee Nation and or wholly owned or entities, well, it's going to include everybody. If you exclude them as the present law, well, it's going to only be, vendors and contractors. So it really depends on how the final act comes forward. Right now, I believe that an earlier amendment had been passed that defined employer as the Cherokee Nation and wholly owned or majority owned entities.
Well, that was my question. The other thing I brought up was that these are goals, are not set in stone as far as that goes. That's what I'm saying when you say goals. That's something you try to achieve. I don't know if I got the gist of Bill's comments. Were you thinking going higher or going lower then?
If it's addressing
It's
Harley's.
directly. Yeah. Well, it says a minimum of 45%. It says the goals up front, but then it says a minimum of 45%, which 45% no problem. I think we can meet and exceed that. But then 10% increase thereafter until we meet 75. Well, I just don't know that first 10% we can reach, but we've never reached the second 10%. And it's goals, but it says a minimum of 45, then 55, then 65, and then we're in trouble. And we're not going to meet the goal, and it says a minimum of. Well, I'm saying that's the floor at that point. And I don't want to put into law expectations that are unreasonable, although I want as high as we can possibly get.
Okay, Mr. Besser, did you have anything else?
No, that's kind of.
Okay, I have Mr. Hoskins, and then England, and then Hembry, and then Crittenden, and then back to Bill John.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I think Bill John's right in as much as that it's not just goals, it seems to me set in stone. I mean, it seems to me you have to meet that 10% every year thereafter 2009 until you get 70. It says 75% goal, but it means 75%. So I wonder, I don't have any specific language in mind, if rather than letting the entities off the hook on the front end and say, just try to accomplish these goals, say you've got to accomplish these goals, but you can go to the commission and you can seek a waiver. And you can seek a waiver if you can demonstrate some factors. And then the commission could make some determination. That is, if we're going to have a commission. That empowers the commission quite a bit, but it also provides for an entity hitting this unrealistic goal, but they've got to demonstrate that they can't reach it.
Yes, Mr. If you would yield, Mr. Hoskins, funny you should mention that because I've been scribbling down some language, as an opt-out, so to speak. What I wrote down here is, and there's two ways we could go about doing this, okay? Because obviously you're setting up a high percentage of Native American employment, but you might consider language then an annual 10% increase thereafter until accomplishing a 75% goal unless exempted for good cause by specific act of the TERO office, TERO commission, or you could even put by the Cherokee Nation Tribal Council, a resolution of the Tribal Council. But that there be some type of opt-out language.
That sounds like a good direction, because we can evaluate it after a number of years and we can say, boy, we've had to do a lot of waivers, or and maybe not us, but the commission, and we may say, well, that really was unrealistic, but it doesn't hamstring it, as Councilman Baker says. So I'd prefer to go that route rather than watering down too much the goals. So that's all I have, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hoskins. Mr. England?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree with Councilor Hoskins there, and I agree with Todd, what he came up with, because I don't want to water this thing down either, because I have seen and heard from too many people that if you give them some leeway, these TERO vendors and contractors are going to continue to be coming up on the short end of the stick until we put some teeth in this thing and make it work. Whoever's in charge of it is going to continue to let these contractors and vendors go by the wayside. And of course, the employment, I agree with Councilor Baker that you can set the goal too high to where they couldn't meet them mandates and stuff. But somehow, my goal, sitting on this TERO committee, is to make sure that our vendors and our contractors are treated right and they get a fair shake, because I'm tired of getting calls every month saying that I didn't get the bid on it, or I didn't know anything about it, or I was low bidder but they didn't give it to me, and this and that. So I'd just like to see us come up with some kind of plan, and I think Todd, if we go this commission route, I think that is absolutely the way to go, in my opinion. Being involved in it for the last 15, 16 years, I think the commission, at least these people will have somebody to go to outside of the administration and stuff and hear their concerns. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. England. Mr. Hembry?
Yeah, we could also go as far as to define what good cause is. But the idea being that I'm an employer, I'm hiring every Indian resume that I get, but I'm still not reaching that goal, and I need to have an outlet to come out and explain that to commission and office, tribal council, of, why it is that I can't reach that goal. And I think that, language to this effect could really, number one, not water down the bill, but also answer Mr. Baker's concerns about hitting or setting too stringent of percentages.
Commissioner, anything else?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Crittenden, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I just have just a brief comment. When I think about setting goals, and especially goals for employment for our people, I kind of think we ought to set goals that are almost unreachable to make us work harder and pull out all the stops. And maybe we don't get there, but we tried real hard. You know what I mean? And rather than set a goal that we know that probably we can get to, we might leave some of our people out that way. So, I mean, that's just a thought. If I'm going to set a goal, I'm going to set it where I've really got to hustle to get there. Yeah.
Was there anything else, Mr. Crittenden?
No, that's all I have.
Thank you. Bill John, I believe you had your hand raised.
I think it's all been said.
Did anyone else on the committee have anything they wanted to share or ask questions about on this particular section? Okay, if not, I had a couple of questions. So, I think that there is a concern, and Mr. Baker touched on that briefly, is that eventually we're going to be so large that it may be almost impossible to reach the goals. And with that, there's no penalties for not reaching the goal, at least on face value in this section, nor opt-out section, in order to give flexibility for more realistic situations. So I'm unsure. I mean, I think we need to do something like this, but I think we need to do additional work as a group, and we'll need your guidance, Todd, in addressing these things. These issues have been brought up. But the other thing that was brought up, but it wasn't really addressed, is, and we've talked about this before, and then will we lose a lot of TERO vendors? And I'm not opposed to losing TERO vendors if it means they have to comply with the same kind of numerical hiring goals that we as a government and our business entities do. Because if I'm going to reach out and make sure that they have adequate business opportunities, and we, in some sense, guarantee them business opportunities, then that means they should be guaranteeing our constituencies jobs to some degree. And I don't know that guarantee is the right word, but there is some sense of that, because if you legislate or mandate that, then we're putting those things into effect and starting the ball rolling. And we need to really think about that as a group, because the way the laws is being fashioned now in this subcommittee means that both the contractors and subcontractors would also have to comply with these numerical hiring goals, whether it was this actual numbers or not. And is it meaningful or meaningless if we don't have any kind of penalties involved? And also, I really like the idea of empowering through the commission. Should we go that route to give some kind of opt-out, so that also gives us a gauge long-term for those other programs like career tech or vocational rehab and those things, to understand where those business needs are if we're continuing to give waivers in certain industries or jobs. Is that what everybody else heard too, kind of? I mean, is that where, Mr. Baker?
You brought something that, maybe at that point when CNI and CNE and those can't reach their goals, if we would allow them to reach their goals with their subs, and all of a sudden they're out looking for the subcontractor that has 100% Cherokee and or 92% Cherokee, then they might be able to raise their numbers by seeking out those that have the highest percentage of Cherokee hires in their sheetrock crew or their block lane crew, or any of those curb and gutter folks or paving folks or whatever, and give them the opportunity to count those percentages. to get it up there, because, I mean, basically, we're all wanting to put Cherokees to work. Whether, and my preference would really be put Cherokees to work on the construction, and yeah, I want the better jobs casino, but put Cherokees in smoke filled rooms is not my goal. But it's just not. And so maybe that would be a possibility of letting them create their numbers up by using the TERO vendors that demonstrate, 100% Cherokee or 90% or the highest number possible as being a value to meeting those goals.
To me, if we're going to have a commission, they would be deciding some of those things too. Mr. Hoskins?
Well, along similar lines in terms of enforcement, if an entity doesn't meet the goal or doesn't meet the requirement under E, is it under I, where it's certifying Indian-owned businesses, the commission would say, we're not going to certify you, didn't meet your goal? Is that how that would play out?
Well, it could be that. They could be, simply decertified. Also, the enforcement provision of this act is found in Section 28, that penalties for violation of this chapter regulation orders of TERO, and then it just lists a whole litany of things that the TERO office could impose. We could word it to where, my idea is that here's the act, here's the title, and at the back of it is an enforcement provision. And it says, for any violations of this title. An employer, contractor, subcontractor, or union who violates this title or rules, regulations, or order of the TERO shall be subject to penalties for the violation, including but not limited to blank. So I think that's the enforcement provision there for that provision, or just simply decertification.
I guess the commission would develop a body of regulations and procedures for handling things like Bill John's talking about, use of subcontractors. Could they do that within legislation?
We make sure that if it's not, if it's not in a general catch-all phrase, we make sure that it is in there. Let's see. Let me look here. Yeah, we would probably want to do some type of catch-all duty at the bottom of Section 5. That's all the comments I had on that.
The other broad general concern that I'm concerned about is creating legislation that improperly imposes tariffs or taxes on or work permits on our entities rather than the non-Indians coming into the Cherokee Nation and benefiting from our job development. Like if we did work permits, that could be an alternative way to limit non-Indians coming in, that they personally would have to pay that work permit to the Cherokee Nation. I know.
That's a good point.
So, and it's not something that by law that the tribe can't turn around and pay that for them.
Ultimately, their bids will pass it along.
I'm talking about employment. I mean, but yeah, they have to pay work permits right now on construction sites, but they don't, like all the non-Indians coming into the casino, they don't have to pay. It's okay.
Yeah.
I don't know, does anyone want to take action at this point on this, or do you want to see a new draft and table until next month? Go ahead.
I was going to say, my preference might be to table to get some language in E that braces some of these ideas we've talked about, because as of right now, I don't think E's enough to, empower our commission, if we do have it, to effectuate that. And reading it a little more, I can kind of see how there might be some other minds that might look at that and say, well, maybe it's not such a hard and fast number. I mean, I read it a few times and thought it was hard and fast, but the establishing numerical hiring goals doesn't sound quite as firm as I thought the first few times. So I wouldn't mind seeing some revised language before we took action. And I guess with that, I'd move to table.
Second.
So we had a motion by Mr. Hoskins to table it, and Mr. Baker seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? And you're going to bring back, thank you, it passed, table till next month, and Mr. Hembry, you're going to bring back some alternative language and considerations.
Yes, what I would do is probably change goals to requirements and add a opt-out clause at the end of section E.
That gives that assuming we have a commission.
And I'll just say TERO commission/office, whatever you all decide.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, the next section is, we're still in section 5L.
Mr. Hembry, Mr. Baker.
If you write it in terms of a commission, it would be one way. If you write it in terms of office, then I think the council should be the body that would give them the waiver.
Got you covered.
I think that we would need to have all three options and the body vote on it, because
Okay.
I can imagine us spending hours doing that, and I don't know that that's what is it. Number one, I don't know if it's appropriate personally for my vote. I don't know if it's appropriate, but number two, I can't imagine what that would look like,
Okay. I'll give you three options.
even if we did do it.
The next, we're still in section 5. The next proposed amendment would be paragraph L. Require employers to give preference to Indian-owned economic enterprises in the award of contracts and subcontracts. New language, this requirement shall also include Cherokee Nation Enterprises, Cherokee Nation Industries, and all other corporations in which Cherokee Nation has a majority interest. The first employment preference shall be Cherokee citizens, and the second preference shall be members of a federally recognized tribe of Indians. Now, you know, that's been the proposed language, yeah?
Mr. Hembry, I like this because I think it's more of the intent than what we had done earlier on G, section 4G, where we include employer, because I'm wondering from a legal standpoint if G, and what we did as a body earlier, if it does not waive some of the sovereign immunity that I think we have as a government or the entities for lawsuits, but this still gets what we need. Is it different or is it the same?
There are some differences in the language, yeah.
Because I'm curious, because I think I've been thinking about G and how it leaves us open to additional legal liabilities that I don't think we intended. But I think L does more what I thought we were all hoping to achieve. And I'm torn by this section because I want to make sure that we make every choice we can to hire Cherokees and Indian people and also promote them as companies, as vendors, and contractors and subcontractors.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, and as we stated earlier, I mean, that's one of the decennial decision by this work group is how we treat the Cherokee Nation and its entities, you know, in this process.
Could you, I'm going to throw this out and tell me, I need input from the committee. Our intent is that we want assurance that the tribe, and not really the tribe so much as our business entities, are complying with Cherokee preference practices. But that doesn't mean we want to open ourselves up for lawsuits, just because they already have a method of going through human resources, an appeals committee at the board level, then they also have the appeals board, I believe, over here, and then they also have our own court system. So they already have a method of if need be, going to a lawsuit. And they have, I think they have some kind of TERO and EEOC in addition to that. But it almost seems like we're inviting something different from that through this G language, but not through L.
I can do whatever the committee.
Good. Mr. Hoskins, our other attorney, yes.
So the concern on G is that we would impose on them the requirement to go to this job bank. Is that what you're looking at? Are you looking at G? Is there a concern with that? Or am I looking at the wrong?
So up on the same page on 4G definitions where it's employer.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so that it forces us into Mr. Henry while he's reading.
Well, I got permission to speak freely. TERO is for companies, contractors, business. I think there's a way that we can split the baby, so to speak.
So do we need 2 acts is what you're saying?
No, not 2 acts. But when you're defining employer, exclude your government, but make your business entities comply with TERO. Because TERO is designed for the workplace. Exclude your government. Your government has a system through their human resources that, if you feel discriminated against, you feel that you're not being treated fairly, the Employee Appeals Board or whatever it's called now, they have that. Now,
but we have 2 different situations. We have vendors and contractors, which are a whole different ball of wax from personnel problems and hiring practices and promotions. And I'm wondering if that's not why we continue to be frustrated by TERO reform, is we're mixing 2 different legal situations, really. And it becomes complicated because we're trying to make it work. That's not saying that 2 acts couldn't be fairly duplicative, but when you start throwing them together, I'm wondering if we're not creating problems because of the interpretation in one section really being about vendors and contractors and the other really being about personnel. Because we've really struggled with this, and it's not because we're not trying to move it forward, but it's been difficult, and I'm not quite sure how to approach it sometimes. Mr. Hoskins, have you had a chance to read that?
I have, and I see what you're saying. So Todd, your suggestion is to keep Cherokee Nation as a government out and apply it to the entities, and then the entities that we traditionally apply.
Yeah, that's one Cherokee citizen's opinion on that.
But the entities are solely owned by the government, so we're still putting the government in the same position almost.
Yeah, but that's kind of, that's why we're in the hybrid of, we're not the real world, there's government, and then, there's the United States government, and then there's, IBM, or General Motors. And in the larger society, you can pretty much keep those, roles separate. Here, as an Indian tribe, we own businesses, all right? Now, I would agree that you don't want to open yourself up to every employee who feels that they've been slighted by a supervisor to come file a TERO violation or some type of use a TERO system to react to that. But on the other hand, Cherokee Nation Enterprises and any other businesses, they act like businesses. They are businesses. And if we're going to apply TERO to our vendors and contractors, the school of thought is we most certainly should apply it to the largest employer of the Cherokee Nation, which is our entities. That's where I'm coming from. I've always felt uncomfortable making the Cherokee Nation subject to TERO, and I don't know if I've expressed that clearly enough, but I do think that the entities should be subject to TERO.
I'd like to wrap up this part of the discussion and start coming to a close, because we actually won't meet again until December, but maybe there's a couple of us that'll volunteer to do some additional work outside this meeting to bring some stronger proposals to the table. Because Mr. Henry's given us a great jump start because we needed it this way. I think this format's great, but it sounds like there's a lot of questions around it. So Our next meeting won't be until December 15th. Do you know if we'll have an election law subcommittee on that day? And that'll be at 3, so is it okay if we met at 2 that day? So December 15th at 2 p.m. would be...
And Madam Chairman, what I will continue to do is to go back over these amendments and make changes that the committee has found. Also, if any individual counselors, feel free to contact me so I can incorporate them into some type of proposal also.
Okay, I have a meeting with Chief Smith at 8 o'clock in the morning concerning TERO and some of his concerns, and I would welcome anybody that wanted to join us for that.
Does that include me?
Yes. They'll make it more entertaining, Mr. Hembry.
I'll try to be there.
Hopefully we don't give him indigestion for the day, but, so, if there's none other, I think this is a good stopping point. We just won't act on any of that at this point. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.